All right, all right. Welcome everyone to the TV Time Machine podcast. I am Luis,
And I'm Adam.
and we love
We love
TV.
TV.
we never get that right. We always are off sync with that. We're trying every week. We get closer. Adam, the best booking agent ever. You booked us another amazing guest. Why don't you introduce our guest today?
Today we have author, filmmaker, and podcaster Mikel J. Wisler. Let me think. You have two novels, right? Correct.
Two novels published right now. Yeah.
3 published short stories. A book about writing, about making films. Numerous short films that have played in numerous festivals with numerous awards.
Amazing.
And a podcast about the intersection of sci-fi and sci-fact.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, the podcast is pretty fun. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. Really honored to be a guest here, and hopefully I can contribute something to your guys' conversation around TV shows and science fiction, and just have fun together.
Yeah, and as you know,
Absolutely.
our podcast is all about deep diving into our addiction to television. We and Adam both grew up with. I'm still trying to figure out where our parents were half the time, if we had that much time. I mean, good parenting, of course, but like, my God, we know a lot about TV. But it's always nice to meet a fellow person that knows more and can contribute more, contribute to the show. So the topic of sci-fi, I was thinking about it earlier.
Oh, something I left out of the
you're fine.
introduction.
Mhm.
Mikel was born in South America.
Oh yes.
Oh, cool.
Mhm.
Where in South America?
I'm in Brazil.
Oh, very
Yeah.
cool. That's on my bucket list to go to.
And
Oh,
you
yeah.
lived there till you were 10, 12?
Yeah,
somewhere?
I was like 14 actually
Oh,
when
wow.
ended up moving back. I mean, I spent some time in the US in between there, but most of my childhood, really, those formative years, grew up in Brazil. So a little different experiences, interestingly enough, in those early years around TV, but still a lot of American TV because a lot of it is exported and dubbed. So watched a lot of ER
Oh yeah.
dubbed.
We love that show. We just talked about that on our saddest TV episodes ever when Mark Green died. Oh, it's totally
Oh, man.
devastated.
Yeah.
But I think that sci-fi is my favorite all-time genre. I was thinking about that earlier. It's like, wait a minute, your all-time favorite genre is sci-fi. Why are you
Yeah.
just realizing this now? But all the shows that I love growing up, most of them had some sci-fi basis or themes. So let's get a little raw here. I know this sounds silly, but how would you describe sci-fi? What's the actual definition of sci-fi to you?
I'm actually reading Orson Scott Card's book on how to write fantasy and science fiction, and he kind of goes through that in detail there. So it's kind of fascinating. Just this weekend, sort of mulling that
Cool.
over, and like what differentiates fantasy and science fiction. Also did a episode about that, my own podcast with a friend of mine who teaches at Colorado University. Picked his brain a little bit. But my definition of science fiction, it really comes down to, well, there's this broader umbrella of, speculative fiction that science fiction and fantasy kind of fit into. But I like Orson Scott Card's idea that science fiction, to a degree, tends to be things that could happen, and fantasy tends to be things that couldn't. So there's things that may be possible with the right innovations in technology, with developments in science that we haven't reached yet, where we speculate a little bit and think about what might happen if we have the power to clone dinosaurs, or what might happen if we manage to figure out that the speed of light maybe isn't the universal speed limit after all, and we can actually do things like travel faster than the speed of light, and therefore reach out much further into the universe than we ever expected to. making those kinds of like leaps or speculations where you can tweak maybe a specific aspect of science and say what would happen if we can manage to make this leap, you know. That to me tends to be science fiction. uh and uh and then if it's more of like what couldn't happen in terms of like, well, if you once you introduce magic, uh you know, like elements like that, then it tends to be more fantasy. So interestingly enough, I often point to the fact that just setting something in a sci-fi like environment, and then like having a story there doesn't necessarily automatically make it science fiction. We have to like kind of look at some of the other elements. So I point to Star Wars and I say, yeah, it's in space. They have spaceships and all kinds of stuff, but there's almost virtually no focus on science whatsoever.
Hmm.
And in fact, we basically have wizards, and,
Hmm.
you know, the Jedi, and
Yeah,
it's
space
basically
wizards.
magic, the Force. It's yeah. So in the end, it's more like fantasy in space than it is science fiction. Whereas I would say something like Jurassic Park um, is very much in the tradition of hard science fiction, of speculating about what would actually be possible if we made the small leap of actually being able to retrieve DNA from extinct creatures like dinosaurs, to the Expanse and
Yeah.
Star Trek. You know, so Star Wars, while it's a little more fantasy, Star Trek tends to be a little more science fiction. Though there's always there's like a little bit of cross pollination between the two genres to a great degree. But that speculation about where might we be headed is also, I think, one of the big factors of science fiction. So there's elements of social exploration and social science that are kind of a part of that.
Crichton's book, that Jurassic Park novel, was an incredible journey as a young. I was blown away when I read that, and then I read Sphere and was very blown away with that as well. I mean,
Fear is wild.
they did not do that movie justice at all. I don't know
Oh,
what happened with that script or the director, or it was just way not what I expected.
it's a tough one. It's a very heady book, and I think that's a tough one to adapt. You know,
Yeah,
it's
and
a hard time adapting these big books to movies, because movies are more like short stories.
yeah,
And
and Sphere played out very much like a movie in the novel. I could see it like in my head,
oh
but
yeah,
the adaptation really veered off, wildly veered off from the source material. So
Mhm.
I was on a very awkward date too, seeing that. So I think this the whole experience was not good, not good. But I'm hoping for a day when they redo Sphere and do it the right way. Like maybe get
yeah,
a J.J. Abrams behind it or someone that can produce like
yeah.
solid stuff.
Denis Villeneuve, that would be an interesting choice.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I think it'll happen. I think that producers will bring it back maybe as a miniseries too, or a Netflix show or something. It's got to happen.
A limited series would be amazing. You wouldn't have to cut everything out, you know.
Yeah, there's so much, so much. Such a good novel. So, what is your favorite sci-fi television show of all time?
Ooh, television show. Uh, Definitely have to go with X-Files. There's been some others that come along. I mean, a close second in a sense might be Futurama, actually.
Futurama is
I
really
love that
good,
show.
both on
Right,
Fox.
right, yeah. Go
Mhm.
figure. Both Fox, both kind of Fox rejects too, in some ways.
Yeah, me and Adam were talking last night or texting last night about how the X Files for the fandom around for 218 episodes, 11 seasons, but it just felt like it was a struggle the whole time. Even the movie struggled a little bit
Yeah,
financially,
yeah,
and that's weird. It's just weird. It feels like, and they did a resurgence of it in 2011, right, where they
right, right.
kept it going somehow.
Yeah, they try to bring it back
Hmm.
and revive and like, oh, here's the story now and all that kind of stuff. And Like the funny part is like I haven't even watched the last few episodes of that resurgence.
I only
I'm
watched
on
half of it.
yeah. I watched like
Yeah.
half of it. I got
Yeah.
to like I think I watched the last one I watched was the episode they almost don't talk at all. They
Oh
go
yeah,
to the
yeah,
automated restaurant, and I was like, this is actually awesome.
yeah.
And then I was like, I don't want to ruin it, and I really don't think that they're going to go anywhere good with this, so I just kind of stopped. I mean to finish it, but then I never have the heart. There's this like nice epistemological tension that exists, and like just like not finishing a story and
Right.
just like letting those characters exist in my head and in that place and be like, I'm in a happy place right now. I don't want to see how they
Yeah,
butcher it.
when the X-Files premiered in the 90s, September 10th, 1993. I remember very well when that show came out. I remember watching the first episode, and it was this huge resurgence of sci-fi because we had, Doctor Who, which is playing in the background. Shout out to our unsponsored
Yeah.
sponsor, Pluto TV. They don't know it yet, but they will sponsor us one day, please. Doctor Who had like a ridiculous amount of episodes. Like we're at 800 now, right? Something crazy.
It's
It's insane. And so they had, and that was, BBC or from Britain. And then it crossed over to syndication in America. So the Americans loved it. And then there was little sprinkles of huge sci-fi shows. Battlestar Galactica is my all-time favorite from the 70s. Like I'm addicted to that show, and then that resurgence. But the X-Files kind of snuck in, and then it made sci-fi cool. Like everyone was like Friday night. I remember my boss at Chuck E. Cheese, my first job, was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get home, picking up a 6-pack, and we always crowd around the TV on Friday nights for X-Files. They were just so excited about it, and
Nice.
didn't it move to Sundays eventually?
I think it did. I
Yeah.
remember
Because
Friday
I
night
remember-
was a big deal.
Yeah, I remember my friend Justin had like a regular Sunday X-Files watch party.
So cool.
And so I feel like at one point they switched it because like the ratings started to slip. So they were just like, oh, give something else to Friday night. But yeah, I feel like it ended. I feel like the show ended its run on Sundays. Because
I think it did.
I remember my friend Justin having those Sunday watch parties.
When was it Robert Patrick from Terminator
Right.
replaced
Oh,
Mulder?
Not that
Why?
late into the series. I think that's when all of us abandoned it once Mulder was gone.
Yeah.
Right.
The last Mulder episode was the last episode for real fans.
Exactly. So just real quick for our listeners, the X-Files revolves around FBI agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, who investigate X-Files marginalized unsolved cases involving paranormal phenomena. Mulder believes in the existence of aliens because his sister was abducted, and Scully is a medical doctor and skeptic, so she's constantly questioning everything. There's episodes where werewolves will toss her across a room, and she's like, "Oh, it was just someone that was on drugs." And Mulder's like, "No, it was a werewolf. Like I saw him turn." And she's like, "Yeah, it's drugs." She never believed it. And even in the movies, when she fell off the flying saucer in the Antarctica, she's like, "Yeah, there's an explanation for this. Science." He's like, "I rescued you from a spaceship when you were like frozen with aliens trying to get us." She's like, "No, it's all science. There's an explanation for it." God, wow, what a, and they kept that theme going. She never really believed, and didn't she get like impregnated by an alien at one point? That show really kind of went off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
What's your
Yeah,
favorite episode of that?
Oh man. Man, when I think of favorite X-Files episodes, what tends to pop into my head right off the bat is Triangle. I don't know if you remember
Season 3, episode 3.
Oh,
that may be
Adam.
that's good job pulling it up.
Like it.
Yeah, it's the one they go into the Bermuda Triangle, and then
Yeah.
they actually utilize split screen. And it was kind of innovative for the time, because we were still all on our standard def little boxes, almost square, but they had the
It was
whole
very
episode.
Brian De Palma.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah.
And that was like the first episode that they had the whole thing widescreen so that they could at times split the screen and you could follow Mulder and Scully as they're kind of in parallel timelines but doing things at the same time and intersecting in this ship that's in this weird time warp in the Bermuda Triangle. And I think partly there is I think it was cool reading, but just the way they visually told the story. uh, who became obsessed with filmmaking
Hmm.
me as like that was some seriously innovative storytelling for TV.
Yeah, every episode felt like a little movie for
Yeah.
sure. The one that I'll never get over, and my brother tortured me with this show, with this episode, uh, was Home.
Oh God, home.
Season 4,
I was
episode
afraid
2.
he's gonna say that.
I've never gotten over that episode. It's about
No.
the inbred family, Adam. It's just like
Oh yes.
I've never been able to get over that. That
That was
one,
disturbing. I had nightmares.
that one, and when Chief Skinner, had that demon woman possessing him in the mirror, or like following him.
I don't
Never
think
got
I
over
remember
that.
that
Oh
episode.
man, Skinner would always get messed up, and he was
Right.
oblivious to it. He's
Yeah.
another one that would get tossed around and possessed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's like,
And then he was still skeptical.
What do you think the future of the franchise is? I do feel like it's going to make a major resurgence very soon, probably in the form of a film or a Netflix streaming something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I think at this point it requires a complete reboot and complete retooling. Because my understanding is that that Gillian Anderson's out. She's like,
Oh yeah,
I am completely done with the
I don't
X-Files.
blame her.
And I can, and yeah, and you know, and at some point, like as a fan, at some point I want it to just like move on, so to
Mhm.
speak. It's obviously been hugely influential. We wouldn't have TV shows like Fringe, you
Oh my
know.
God, Fringe! I was just about to say that, huge influence.
And even and Fringe actually pays homage. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. Pays homage at one point. Trying to remember the episode that there's a discussion about it, and then they're like in some court in a hearing about this Fringe department. They even make a reference to the Fringe department's former X designation. So you know they're a clear nod to like we're supposedly existing in the same universe as the X-Files to a degree.
Chris Carter probably was like, no one asked me about that.
Like hell it is.
He seems like I don't know. He seems like that kid that was always really obsessed and knew his shit when it came to sci-fi and super protective of it. I loved Fight the Future. I mean, I went and saw that in the theater like 8 times. I was obsessed with it. And then the second one was like a comedy drama. It sucked. Remember that one? The second theatrical?
Yeah. It was a weird choice for a movie because it was just a long standalone episode.
It was very tongue-in-cheek and not in a good way. Like it was like Star Trek Insurrection. That movie was like a long episode of, and I remember going to see that with my cousins because you have First Contact, and then you have Star Trek Insurrection. So you're like, yeah, that like great follow-up, and it's like Picard falls in love with like this person, and it's just so bad. And then Data is possessed again. Data is always getting possessed by something or reprogrammed. That's a great segue into the Star Trek talk. I am obsessed, and I call myself a Trekkie, but I always get outwitted or outmatched by someone that knows more.
Well, yeah,
but it's hard to call yourself a Trekkie with other sci-fi fans around. And I'll stop talking about myself here in a second. However, the most Trekkiest thing I ever did was I was working at Hulu in LA, and me and my friend Riley bought tickets to Star Trek 3 Beyond. Hello. No, you're fine.
I forgot to turn my key light on.
What was that?
I forgot to turn my key light on.
Oh, now's a good time to do it.
Yeah.
Adam forgot to turn his key light on. Oh, you're fine. How old is your daughter?
She's 7 years old. Do you want to come over and say hello?
I have a 12-year-old. So
Mm-hmm.
Adam has like, how old are your kids, your daughters, Adam?
14 and 13.
Oh my God. I am not
They
looking
both
forward to
just
that.
had their birthdays. And then an 11 and a 6-year-old son.
Yeah, my daughter is in the phone and not talking phase right now. It sucks.
Oh,
Yeah.
And she's not mean or anything. It's just like phone, drawings, don't interrupt me. I'm focused. You guys are weird and annoying.
all right.
Me and my son, he's 10, and so we nerd out over everything, and we're playing games until like 2 a.m. And she's like, I'm trying to sleep. It's just like, anyway, enjoy the 7-year-old. Enjoy
Yes, yes.
that. What was I saying? Oh, I was saying that the nerdiest Trek thing I ever did was me and my friend Riley, when Star Trek Beyond came out, there was like an all-day viewing of of JJ's reboot Into Darkness and then Beyond. And it was right after Anton Yelkin passed away. So there was a lot of people there, and then at the beginning of Beyond, they did a little for Anton. Man, it was not a dry eye in that, because it was like literally within weeks of the release of that film.
Yeah.
The timing of it was crazy. So, and I know some people don't really like the J.J. Abrams take, the Kelvin timeline. What is your stance on Star Trek?
I definitely don't call myself a Trekkie either. That's like a big territory to get in, because I've been much more casual. It's like one of those shows that like I always like would kind of pop in and pop out, and I didn't watch as religiously as I probably should have. What I have found is that I'm like coming back to it as an adult and like rewatching and being like, wow, this is really good. Like being pulled back into it. So I definitely don't consider myself an expert, but as far as influential sci-fi that's like really worthwhile and even worth revisiting, it stands up, is what I'm finding. So I get why it's hugely influential. And on the whole, I think if I'm going to land somewhere in the arguments and debates over Star Wars and Star Trek, I am probably more on the Trek side in a lot of ways. And though I like the epic storytelling of Star Wars, again, I would say, well, yeah, I love Lord of the Rings and I love Star Wars, but to me those are kind of over on the fantasy side. And as such, the storytelling within Star Trek tends to be more, I think, aligned up with the traditional science fiction realm. Grew up watching all the movies pretty religiously. So that first movie is
it's a mess.
It's like
the first Next Gen movie,
docking scene of a spaceship ever.
Oh yeah, the motion picture had like an 18-minute like let's show the Enterprise and dock with it scene. Yeah, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, me and my son watched that, and he's like, "What is going on here?" Like 5 minutes in, I'm like, "Oh, they're just docking." I think that was like it's interesting, one of the biggest studio like risk, right? Because they took a show that had been canceled, right? Adam, Star Trek was canceled, brought back as an animated series, canceled, motion picture, everyone hated it. And it's like, okay, well, let's just turn the franchise on its head and kill Spock, bring back a villain from the TV show. Most brilliant thing they ever did. I think that really saved the franchise.
Wrath of Khan.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
best movie ever. That's like my favorite all time. That and First Contact,
Yeah.
I think, are. What about you guys? What do you think on the movie level or episodes? What are your standouts?
When I was a kid, The Search for Spock was my favorite.
Oh yeah,
I
I
don't
read
know
a-
why that one definitely appeals to kids more. It wouldn't be my favorite now. Wrath of Khan is definitely my favorite now. But
I heard a
yeah.
lot of messy details about Search for Spock. Like, Shatner was throwing his weight around a lot at that point
Hmm.
because he really wanted, to direct. And I think Leonard Nimoy ended up directing Search for Spock, and then they went commercial, way commercial and silly with The Voyage Home, which is it's I don't know how to describe that movie. It's like, let's make Star Trek for everyone. Let's make it a comedy about whales, and it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. I couldn't believe it when I saw it as a child. I'm like, this is. You take you take the people you love from a show, put them in the '80s, which at that time was our time, and it
Right.
worked. It was amazing. And then Star Trek V is when Shatner got his chance to direct, and that was wow, what a piece of shit that was.
Yeah, I
Let's
think
go.
as a kid, I loved I loved the whales as a
Yeah.
kid, but I think in retrospect, it's Wrath of Khan for me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let's go ahead and take our first break. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about our sponsor when we get back, our official sponsor. I just have to pull up the crazy thing they sent me and work it in somehow. I'll do that when we come back for our first break. Okay.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to sign us out and then I'll pop right back in while this renders.